Well, today I've simply entitled the word Good Guy, Bad Guy, and I can't explain much more about it till we get into the message, and then hopefully it will make some sense to you. And I'm going to jump right into the message right now in Genesis chapter 6, so we're pretty early on in the scriptures, and I'll be in a couple different translations today. We've got the words up above. Beginning in the Message translation, in verse 5 of Genesis 6, it says, God saw that human evil was out of control. People thought evil, imagined evil, evil from morning to night. God was sorry that he had made the human race in the first place. It broke his heart. God said, I'll get rid of my ruined creation. I'll make a clean sweep. People, animals, snakes, bugs, birds, the works. I'm sorry that I made them. This is leading right up to Noah. And from that pretty inclusive list there, it looks like maybe the fish are the only ones that came out okay on that besides Noah. I mean, he didn't even mention fish here, but in Genesis chapter 1, he mentioned fish, so they must have been around and they just rode the storm. But here we are in Genesis chapter 6. How in the world did man get so sideways so quickly that he's considered a total mess, and God is sorry that he even created man by chapter 6 already? How could it get so bad so soon? Please bear with me for like about 3 minutes as I give you some backstory to the message today. This information in the next 3 minutes won't get you into the kingdom, but it'll help you understand some of what we're going to see in this story here. What you and I have come to know as the creation story in Genesis chapter 1, a little bit in chapter 2, that is actually a recreation story. Genesis 1:2 says that the earth was without form and void. Darkness covered the earth. The earth was without form and void. And what, if you study, you will see there that my God does not make junk. He didn't make junk then. He doesn't make junk now. He didn't make junk of you. He never makes junk of anything. In the Hebrew, Genesis 1:2 says that the earth became without form and void. God didn't create a mess and then say, now let me clean it up. Something occurred between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 that made a mess, and so that what we have come to know as the creation story is actually a recreation story. What occurred between verse 1 and verse 2 was the expulsion of Lucifer and 1/3 of the angels that were kicked out of heaven. That's in Isaiah 14:12, and that's what happened was they were kicked out, banished to the earth, and when Lucifer has the freedom to rule, everything becomes a mess. It always will. He was set, so that's how the earth got so messed up, and God recreated it. And that's why in 1 John 4:4, it says, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. If you feel like every demon in hell is just camped on your doorstep, just causing you a hard way to go, the truth is God's got twice as many. I mean, it's not even a close call. It's not a close call. I hope God can win this one. Only 1/3 of the angels fell. Doing the math, 2/3 are still with God. So what we have come to know as creation is actually a recreation story. And what we do see in the very beginning is that Satan and the fallen angels were still roaming the earth and had the freedom to move about. Now, I'm at the end of my 3 minutes without getting all weirded out on anything. What happened was that those fallen angels that were called sons of God had relations with the daughters of men. Say it isn't so. It's so. The first verse of our opening text in Genesis 6 says exactly that's what happened, and that's where the giants came from. David and Goliath, I mean, these guys had 9-foot beds. These are some big people. That's how they came about. And man was so evil and so messed up that it broke God's heart, and he was sorry that he ever made man. So that was the backstory. Now we're up here to Noah. And maybe you have, and quite likely if you have children, read the story of Noah as Noah in the ark to your children. And it's a story of, at least the way it's commonly understood, how God saved Noah, the only good guy in an evil world. You know? And there was a bunch of bad guys, and they all drowned. And then there's this one good guy, and his ship came in handy, and he was okay. And so the implication there is that if you're a good guy, God will save you. But if you're not, you're toast. The idea is that good people are winners and bad people are losers. And really, that's nothing more than good old-fashioned works righteousness. We don't teach that to our little children, but that's kind of the implication. Noah was good, so he got in the boat. And it can convey this idea that God is some mean despot, you know, kind of like Elf on the Shelf that's just watching to see if you get out of line, as if that requires a lot of stealth, right? That's not a hard deal. How about this title? How about this new title? Noah and the Gospel of Jesus Christ. Instead of Noah and the ark, how about Noah and the Gospel of Jesus Christ? Let's look at it this way. Verse 9 says, "This is the story of Noah. Noah was a good man, a man of integrity in his community. Noah walked with God." And again, it could seem like the good guys win and the bad guys are losers. But Noah really wasn't a good guy. Wait. Didn't we just read that he was? Yeah, we did. I mean, I started and I read, up through verse 7, and then I just read in verse 9 that he's a good guy, but something happened there. Noah wasn't a good guy. Noah was a graced guy. He grew up in a difficult time, and verse 8 of Genesis 6 explains the process that we need to understand by which God chose to save Noah and bless him. It says that in verse 8 of Genesis 6, Noah found favor, or found grace, depending on your translation, in the eyes of the Lord. Noah isn't a story of God rewarding a good guy. Noah's a story of a person in reality that was just as unworthy as all the other evil people in his day, but this one found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Wasn't something special in him until, verse 9, the good guy, that came after God's grace. There was something that happened when God's grace came into his life that changed his life and made him that man of outstanding character. Even though the neighborhood went to pot, Noah didn't begin as a righteous man. He began as a sinner, not unlike everyone else on earth in his day. But the difference with Noah and the others is he found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So, this story begins with one of the most negative descriptions of humanity in all of Scripture. I mean, we're here in Genesis chapter 6, and already God is saying, I'm sorry I ever came up with that idea. Where do you go from there? That's pretty bad. Well, Romans 3:23 says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Everyone in Noah's day came up short, just like in our day. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Everyone came up short. God didn't have a good person to work through. So God graced somebody, Noah, and that made him able to live in the goodness of God and accomplish his plan of redemption. God worked, as he always does, by saving some undeserving person and by his grace, and thereby enabling them to live a righteous life, and only by God's grace and not their own actions. So the ark was just the vehicle that God planned and used to save man, to save creation, as many as he could. God was the architect of that vehicle, and he gave Noah very specific plans, blueprints, if you will, for building that ark. I mean, people that are into maritime study know that the dimensions, the length, the width, and the height are actually the most stable dimensions for any vessel. Even if the vessel's 10 times as long, it's the most stable dimensions for a vessel handling rough seas. God gave him those very specific plans, and the plan sounded ridiculous. It really sounded ridiculous. He's building this ark. There is no lake nearby. There is no water nearby. Furthermore, it had never rained on earth, ever. Stormy weather, they didn't know what that was. Up until that point, earth was watered by dew. Never rained. So here's this guy in the middle of like a desert, and he's building a big boat. I mean, it seemed ridiculous, and his friends and his neighbors, all those other needy people, they mocked away. And they thought that the hope and plan for salvation just seemed ridiculous. But it was God's grace. And as Noah built that ark, and it's a big vessel, had one door. That just had one door. And when time came to load the animals and Noah and his sons and his wife and their wives into the boat, it says that God himself shut that door to keep them safe. And God's saving grace has also but one door, and his name is Jesus Christ. He says it in John chapter 10, verse 9, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, he will go in and out, and he will find pasture. Friends, our Heavenly Dad is a gracious shepherd who provides and protects his own. He's not some mean despot. I know you're all familiar with the 23rd Psalm. Listen to these 4 verses here. This one out of the New Living. It says that the Lord is my shepherd. I have all I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. And even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. As I was just reading that, I just thought, this just seems to skip across the topics over the last several weeks about going through storms, about going through valleys, and how God makes doors of hope out of those. But the thing that we want to look at here with David, who penned that 23rd Psalm, was that life wasn't always sweet for David. If you think that he had it easy as a shepherd boy, it wasn't always a walk in the park. David knew what it was like to be up all night in the cold, dark, lonely nights, watching over his father's sheep. David knew. He knew what it was to experience those dark and lonely nights of the soul when he was in utter failure and in humiliation as a king. He knew what that was like firsthand, and he knew firsthand that his good shepherd, his heavenly dad, was going to lead him in a place where he could rest. That's what the 23rd Psalm, that's what he penned right there. As a gracious shepherd, he was going to make him rest. Now, there's an intimacy of friendship that comes about and bypasses the head knowledge, settles into the heart when you believe and you've experienced that this good shepherd loves you, cares for you, and protects you, even in the darkest night, even in the worst and most difficult season. There's something that happens to your relationship with God. And that's what David was penning in the 23rd Psalm. So back to this story. Noah, his name means rest. Rest is found in the grace of God. There's something that happens there that is different, my friends, different than you being a good person. Romans 4:5 says, "But to him who does not work, but believes on him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is accounted for righteousness, just as David also describes the blessedness of the man to whom God imputes righteousness apart from works." At the worst of his time, David could look ahead, and in the Spirit of God, he could see that there was coming a day, and it wasn't the day he lived in, but there was coming a day where God would count a man righteous, not based on what he did, but something else had to happen that made him righteous, not on what the man deserved. In the Message translation of Romans 4, there it reads, "If you're a hard worker and do a good job, you deserve your pay. We don't call your wages a gift. But if you see that the job is too big for you, that it's something only God can do, and you trust him to do it, you could never do it on your own, no matter how hard and long you worked, well, that, trusting him to do it, is what gets you set right with God, by God, sheer gift." Friends, grace is the undeserved, unearned gift of righteousness. Nothing we do can earn that gift. It's a gift that God gives us. There's something that we want to observe in the life of this person, Noah, pertaining to him finding grace. Noah invested 120 years of his life fulfilling the assignment that he felt God had given him. "Noah, yes, Lord, build me a boat." That's what he sensed. Seemed useless, needless, but he went ahead to fulfill that assignment. And it doesn't look like he got any help. It doesn't look like he got any encouragement from his neighbors, but rather they mocked him for doing it. Can you imagine being his wife? "Hey, honey, what are you doing today?" "Cutting wood." "Have a good day." 40 years later, "Hey, honey, what are you doing today?" "Cutting wood." "Really?" Another 80 years go by. "Hey, honey, what are you doing today?" "Nailing wood." "Really?" 119 years go by. "Now what?" "I'm going out and finding some animals." 120 years, he comes up before her. "What?" "Hey, let's take a boat ride." I would like to be the wife of that guy. His whole life invested in something that seemed to make no natural sense, but he in his heart believed what God had asked him to do. What I want to understand here, this guy found grace in the eyes of the Lord. I want you to understand that God is not opposed to effort. He's opposed to earning. You know, our life is easier because Snowplow Harry gets up in the morning, because some truck driver drives the groceries to the store for us, and the Maytag man is just standing by in case we need him, you know. Our life's easier because someone does their job. So God doesn't save us and say, "Hey, just sit on the shelf and one day I'm going to blow a trumpet, here you come," you know. He's not opposed to our effort, but he wants us to be perfectly clear. There's nothing you can do to earn or deserve salvation. It's a gift. It's gift righteousness. Not one thing you can do. You simply need to accept it. And being brought up in church, somebody was asking us, I don't know if it was this morning, you know, we've been in church for a long time. I think it was Mary Lou. Yeah, 4.5 years old. Pamela, you know, probably all her life as well. So we've heard a lot about Jesus and how you accept him. But somehow, along the years and decades, we've also learned a lot about now you need to do a bunch of stuff to stay accepted. And that's Jesus plus. That's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's something else. There's nothing that we can do. So David, King David, that shepherd, confirms this way of looking at it by saying, The one who trusts God to do the putting everything right without insisting on having a say in it is one fortunate man. Fortunate, those whose crimes are carted off, whose sins are wiped clean from the slate. Fortunate, the person against whom the Lord does not keep a score. And he goes on, do you think for a minute that this blessing is only pronounced over those of us who keep our religious ways and are circumcised? Or do you think it's possible that the blessing could be given to those who never even heard of our religious ways, who were never brought up in the disciplines of God? We all agree, don't we, that it was by embracing what God did for him that Abraham was declared righteous. The King James says that Abraham believed God and it was accounted unto him for righteousness. That was before the Mosaic Law. There wasn't a bunch of things he could do, but he believed God, and God says that makes you righteous. Hebrews 11:7 says this, by faith Noah built a ship in the middle of dry land. He was warned about something that he couldn't see. If he was only looking by his natural eyesight, he probably would have discounted that and said, man, I must have ate pizza too late or something, because there's just no way God. I mean, he's smarter than to say build a boat in the middle of a desert. No way. He didn't look at what he couldn't see. He acted on what he was told, and the result, his family was saved. His act of faith drew a sharp line between the evil of the unbelieving world, the neighbors, and the righteousness of the believing world. And as a result of his believing God and not going by what he saw, it says that he became intimate with God. Intimate with God. In the Message translation, King James says that Noah became an heir according to the righteousness of God, according to faith. An heir of righteousness. So Noah found grace. The ark was God's plan. The ark was God's plan to save man. And just that plan in that day. Jesus Christ was the door. Jesus Christ was the only door. He is the only door. There's only one way to the Father, and that is through the Son, Jesus Christ. The only door by which whomsoever will be saved. And the good news is that Noah is a bad guy that received the goodness of God's amazing grace, and it caused him to live a life of character. And God that saved him that way is the same God that still saves people today that way by his grace, not by their effort or their exceptional goodness. Noah only became the kind of man which we see that he is because God saved him by grace. God empowered him to live a new covenant life by that same saving grace. And all throughout the new covenant in the Bible, God proclaims that we're saved by grace through faith alone. It's a gift of God. It's nothing that we do to deserve it. And when you get that as not just a familiar verse, but when you have that etched in your heart, then when something goes wrong, as a little toddler spills another glass of milk, as adults, we make another stupid decision. When something goes wrong, we know that our relationship with our Savior, Jesus Christ, is still intact. The love of God is way bigger than that. If you think that you can earn his love, if you think you can unearn his love, friends, this love, it just passes knowledge. It just blows your mind. He's that good. And he's that much into you. That's the grace that Noah found that made his life different than everyone else around him in those days.